This show is not a substitute for professional counseling, and no relationship is created between the show host or guests and any listener. If you feel you are in need of professional mental health and are a UA student, we encourage you to contact the UA Counseling Center at 348-3863. If you are not a UA student, please contact your respective county's crisis service hotline or their local mental health agency or insurance company. If it is an emergency situation, please call 911 or go to your nearest emergency room.
It's 6 o'clock and time again for Brain Matters, the official radio show of the UA Counseling Center. We are broadcasting from the campus of the University of Alabama. Good evening. My name is Dr. B.J. Guenther, and I'm the host of the show along with my colleague and producer, Catherine Howell. And in case you don't know, the show is about mental and physical health issues that affect college students, in particular UA students. So you can listen to us each Tuesday night at 6 p.m. on 90.7, or you can listen online at WVUAFM.ua.edu. You can also download the MyTuner radio app and just type in WVUA FM 90.7 and listen to us that way. Also, I mention this at every show. We are already booked out for our shows for the end, all the way to the end of this semester. We only do shows in the fall and in the spring. So we'll start back up in January with our spring semester shows. And if you have any ideas for upcoming shows, please send those to me and email those to me at brainmattersradio@wvuafm.ua.edu. And I'm always interested in ideas that people have when it comes to college mental health trends, or just college mental health in general. Tonight's topic is an interesting one because it's something, I don't know about you, Catherine, but this is something I feel like I'm talking about relationships all the time, and mostly about romantic relationships. I mean, there's a lot that we talk about with regards to roommates, friends, but we talk a lot with students about breakups, about where to date, how to get a date, and that kind of stuff. So tonight's show is called Navigating Relationships in College. Navigating relationships, both romantic and platonic, can be a difficult task, and the pandemic hasn't made it any easier, especially in college. When students are given opportunities to meet new people and foster new connections, the path to healthy relationships can be a bumpy road. So college can be the place you find your closest friends, your best mentors, or even your life partner. But unfortunately, not all relationships are positive and healthy ones, and we can attest to that here at the Counseling Center. My guest tonight is Dr. Kim Jenkins-Richardson. Dr. Jenkins-Richardson is a licensed professional counselor and supervisor in private practice with nearly 2 decades experience working with diverse populations. I know Kim because she was formerly a colleague here at the Counseling Center, and I miss you, Kim. And I'm glad you're on the show. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I miss all of you guys as well. And so thank you for having me on this show and talking about this topic. It is such a big topic, but it's also an important one as well.
Don't you agree? When you were here at the Counseling Center, how many years were you here?
I was at the Counseling Center for 10 years.
Oh, I cannot believe that.
Yeah.
But don't you agree that we see a lot of students that are really upset, worried, overthink, stressed out, sometimes even could be life-threatening when it comes to relationships?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And it's always really difficult to be involved in a relationship and have expectations for it and then have it to kind of fall apart. The rug is kind of pulled out from under you.
Yeah.
Right. So, we do have a lot of students who really struggle with that. And also start to have some uncertainty about what the future is going to look like as it relates to future relationships, and even those platonic relationships as well.
Definitely. Before we get started, before we really get into the topic, tell the listeners about yourself, even more than what I described in the introduction, yourself, your credentials, and why you're interested in this topic.
Yeah, absolutely. So as BJ said, I am Dr. Kim. So I am a licensed professional counselor here in the state of Alabama. I'm also a nationally certified counselor. I have a huge passion for working with college age students. As I said before, the big bulk of my career was working at the counseling center here at the University of Alabama. But also, it's something really unique about this population because it's that cusp of transition from being high school, and this is your first adult experiences. So I love working with this population. And the relationship piece, I've always really loved relationships. For a long time, I thought I was going to do strictly marriage and family.
Me too.
But the most amazing thing. But after some time, I realized that I wanted to do something a little bit different. But even in my practice, so I'm the owner of Jenkins-Richardson and Associates Counseling and Consulting, which is a group private practice here in Tuscaloosa. I see a lot of couples, right? I see individuals who are unmarried, who are college students, who are trying to navigate being a couple, all the way up to I have clients that are like in their 60s and they are newly married or have been married for some time and some things are breaking down in their relationship. So it is a great population to work with. It is a great I'm excited about this topic because we're going to hit on some important things to think about and to consider when you're talking about how to navigate those relationships in this stage of your life.
Yeah, and it is very confusing for some students. I get asked this question all the time. Where do you meet people? And I'm like, why are you asking me this? I've been married over 25 years. I don't know. But we go through that a lot, and it seems like it is even though we're on a campus of almost 40,000 students, I call it a big cruise ship because I feel like everybody just keeps running into each other. But, where are some places to meet people? Do people ask you that in your private practice, and what do you say?
Yes. So that's really interesting. And I do get that question. I say the same thing. Well, I've been married for like 16 years, right? So it's a little bit hard for me to say like all the places that that you can meet people here. But, I also ask them about what the type of person that they are trying to attract, right? And so I think that's also a big part of it as well. So if you are a person that is more like mild and meek and you are not that person that is out and about all the time, a party or a bar may not be the best place to meet someone because that is probably inconsistent with what you're looking for. So, but there are tons of places, right, that you could be walking your dog at River Road Park, right? Or Jack Warner Parkway and run into that person. And it's okay if that's where you meet them. So it's no magic place that we can just definitely say that, yes, for sure, this is the place that you're going to meet the person that you're supposed to be with. Or even if college is that place that you're supposed to meet the person that you're going to be with, right? That's
right. I feel like so many students feel like there's a ticking time clock going off. And once they graduate, that's it. They've got to meet somebody here while they're in college or they lose that opportunity. Of course, it is true that while you're in college, that is probably the one time in your life where you're around the most people who are your age.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think there's also some like even folklore about this as well. Maybe there are stories from like grandparents to say, oh, well, your grandma and your grandpa met each other. She was tutoring him in math his freshman year in 1961 or something like that. And that may have been great at that point in time. But sometimes those things don't happen for you. And what we do know as well, as generations kind of, evolve, that people aren't getting married at 24, 25 years old anymore. They're getting married much older because they're focused on their career. So just to think that you are going to meet someone when you're 18, 19, and 20 years old, that you're not going to marry till you're 30 years old is very interesting, right?
Yeah, and at some point that can be unrealistic. In this day and age. How do relationships change? With the transition from high school to college.
Yeah, that's a very important question. And I know a lot of people struggle with the thoughts of relationships changing as we change and evolve. Sometimes it even manifests as guilty feelings, right? That you are sometimes leaving people behind. But we have to give ourselves a little grace to know that, as I said before, as we grow and evolve, some of the commonalities change. That is the glue that holds these relationships together. For friends, just because we're best friends in elementary school, because we were in Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts, or went to the same school, or sat near each other in class or band or art, sometimes when we don't have those common connections anymore, we struggle to find how we jive or gel together. And honestly, we may not anymore. Yeah. And that's okay too.
It is. I had a student actually last week that we talked about this, and it was kind of like puzzling to her because I won't say she had lost a friend here in college, but it has changed. And we had to have that conversation, just like what you were saying. Friendships change. And sometimes when it's convenient, like if you lived in the dorm next to somebody, you become very close friends with somebody. But then when you move to your own apartment, they move to their own apartment. Yes. Then it doesn't mean that the friendship is over. It's just harder to maintain.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, I think we're going to take a short break right now, but when we come back, I was reading an article in preparation for this show, and the first thing they talked about was long distance relationships. Let's get into that, because that is where, I don't know about you, Catherine, but this is where, I have had some conversations about long distance relationships. So hang on, we'll be right back. You're listening to Brain Matters on 90.7 The Capstone.
WVUA-FM, Tuscaloosa.
This show is not a substitute for professional counseling, and no relationship is created between the show host or guest and any listener. If you feel you are in need of professional mental health and are a UA student, we encourage you to contact the UA Counseling Center at 348-3863. If you are not a UA student, please contact your respective county's crisis service hotline or their local mental health agency or insurance company. If it is an emergency situation, please call 911 or go to your nearest emergency room.
Hey, you're back listening to Brain Matters on 90.7 The Capstone. I'm Dr. BJ Guenther. We're talking tonight about navigating relationships in college. My guest is in private practice here in Tuscaloosa, Dr. Kim Jenkins-Richardson. She's a licensed professional counselor and a supervisor, and has a lot of experience with college students mainly. I mean, because this is probably, you were a former colleague here at the Counseling Center, and we're here for 10 years. And this is probably, is this the place that you worked maybe the longest, or the population you worked with the longest?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely spent more time working with that population than any of the other populations combined, for sure.
It's fun. Working with college students, it's fun. It's challenging. I tell people it's never boring, because you really never know what's going to happen next,
Absolutely.
And when we left off before the break, we were talking about, I said I was going to ask you about long distance relationships. In the article that I mentioned before the break, it said that 75%, let's see, this article was from last year, 75% of college students have a long distance relationship at some point during their college career. So what do you think about long distance relationships? Like, what's your opinion and experience with them?
Wow. Okay. So I feel like they are workable. It can happen. People do it all the time. Some people do it and it's great. Some people do it and it's a train wreck, right? But it's really about making sure that you have some key things set up in the relationship before you make the decision about whether or not you're going to do this, right?
Yes.
And some of those key things are communication and clarity. Right? Being very clear about what your expectations are and what you are looking for, right? So when someone is leaving home, leaving their partners behind at home, or maybe their partner is away at a different school, again, being clear about your intentions, but also being realistic, right? We know one of the hardest things with navigating a long distance relationship is the communication concerns. I'm out doing my own thing. Things are happening at home. Things are happening at my partner's school, at my school. And so I don't have a lot of time to really communicate with my partner. Also, not feeling a part of the partner's life. So you seeing your partner's photos on social media and they're having the best time and you are not a part of that. And the big thing is that companionship piece, right? Depending on what your relationship was like before, you may have spent tons of time together, specifically if it's like a high school relationship and maybe you guys were able to see each other every day or every other day. And now you're not, right? And sometimes when that companionship piece is missing, you really want someone to go out to Taco Mama's with you on Tuesday, but your partner,
it can be lonely.
It is lonely.
That's one of the things the article says, like, this can really be a difficult time because, like you said, you don't see your boyfriend, girlfriend, partner the same, as much as you used to, and you do get lonely.
Yeah, absolutely. And then when that loneliness kind of creeps in, that then leads to behavior unbecoming of someone who is in a monogamous or exclusive relationship, right? And then we have problems.
And trust issues.
Yeah. And then there's a problem.
That's the complaint I hear the most is the trust issues. What do you think about apps? Like, what's your opinion about dating apps? Because I'll tell you, when they first started coming out, and people were mentioning it to me, I was against it. I'm not going to lie. I was like, this is crazy. This, this is dangerous. Yeah. Whatever. I've come around a little bit more, I'm going to say, but it just depends. And the only reason I've come around to it does up your numbers. And that's what I tell students. Okay, it does up your numbers. But some of these apps are just, sometimes I think they feed more into, low self-esteem, questioning about yourself as far as likability, and you know what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So those apps can be a hit or miss, in my opinion. So yes, it provides you opportunity to meet new people that you probably would not meet under normal circumstances, but it also leaves you open to some things like disappointment and things like being ghosted, right? So that's a big thing right now. And being ghosted has its own set of issues that come along with that, feeling.
I think we did a whole show on that. Didn't we do a whole show on that, Catherine?
Yeah.
Which is perfect timing with Halloween.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Getting ghosted, it does help, it garners feelings of rejection and uncertainty. You don't know why that communication abruptly stopped, and it may feed into some insecurities, low self-esteem, low self-worth. And that's unfortunate, specifically from someone that doesn't know you, right? It's one thing if your friends say, hey, there's something going on and I'm really not feeling you, or you're not a good friend. And then you can own some of that, right? Maybe you weren't being a good friend, but someone who doesn't know you is making you feel this way. That's a whole nother show within itself, honestly.
That is. I say it's a whole nother session.
It's a whole nother session. Absolutely. But you have to be really careful with the dating apps, making sure that you're going in it for the right reasons, and whatever those reasons are, make sure that you're clear on those reasons as well. Are you looking for something more long-term? Okay, be clear about it. If you're looking for someone to just hook up with, that you have a physical or a sexual attraction to, be honest with that, and that's okay, right? And just not having your expectations set so high that when this person, if something doesn't work out, that you aren't kind of left holding the bag of expectations that this was going to go somewhere.
And I think that's what happens a lot. People get led on and it doesn't work out. Or on the topic of ghosting, what do you tell people, not necessarily having to do with apps, but let's say in general, what do you tell students who you see that come in and talk to you about they ghosted me or I haven't heard back from them? Do you encourage them to reach out to that person, or do you encourage them to move on? What do you say?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. So the one thing that I kind of attend to when we talk about this I am being ghosted, right? So we talk for a second about what that is. And basically, when I'm gonna say the ghostee, the person who is ghosting,
Right.
probably lacks communication skills. Like they don't have the communication skills to have an open and honest conversation with you,
That's right.
right?
That's right.
And if you are interested in this person being in a relationship with that person, we know that one of the cornerstones to having a healthy, good relationship is communication.
Yes.
So this actually may be a red flag, or here's your sign that this person may not be the best person for you because they're lacking communication skills.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you choose to go out and try to seek this person even more, you have to understand that you're opening yourself up to possible further disappointment. I often tell them, look at the signs. The signs are already here very early on in this pre-relationship that this person may be struggling in this area.
Mm-hmm.
Is this something that you want to continue to experience as a part of this relationship? And if the answer is no, then it may be worthwhile to just move on and just let bygones be bygones and say, hey, I enjoyed the experience for what it was, and now I'm ready to move on to something else.
And I think a lot of people take it personally and they get stuck on that. They get stuck on that. They overthink it, and it might not have really anything to do with them necessarily. It might be that the other person doesn't want to be in a relationship, or they change their mind. That people have right to do that,
Yeah.
Okay, here is a big one that I spend a lot of time talking about too, and I bet Catherine does too, is the label, like what do we label this relationship? And also calling each other girlfriend and boyfriend. It may sound very elementary, but I'm not kidding.
Yeah.
This is a conversation I have a lot with people that they bring up.
Yeah.
I just asked somebody today, like, how are you labeling your relationship? Or do you call her your girlfriend? Or is that important for your generation? What's your opinion on that, Kim?
Yeah, so I think it really comes down to what the intentions are for this relationship. This kind of goes like a play on talking about monogamy and exclusivity versus just kind of like your casual dating, which happens very often in this population in college, right? I mean, there's tons of temptation in college, and some college students come in with the opportunity, with the idea that this is the opportunity for them to date around and meet and mingle with new people, because traditionally the expectation is after college, you are going to do your career, you're going to potentially be married, have a family at some point in time. So the one thing that I say with folks who are either that is a couple currently or a single person looking for a relationship, again, clear communication about your intentions. If you're, just looking for someone to be like your plus one for events and stuff like that, be open and say that. If you are looking for that physical, sexual, just say that. If you're looking for something more long-term and more solid, monogamous, say that as well. But I think one of the worst things for someone who is interested in a monogamous relationship in college, or really any environment, is to go into a relationship where both partners aren't on the same page, right? They want different things. Or if you are that partner who is okay with it right now and think that you're going to somehow change your partner's mind and make them want something different than what they have said they want.
It's very important. I know we've talked about communication a lot, but that is really what we stress when students come. And that's really one of the most important things in a relationship. Right. And I think it's very awkward sometimes at this age, to be honest. And we haven't even mentioned alcohol involved, but
absolutely.
Maybe we need to talk about that too in just a minute. I want to take I want you to answer an email question if you don't mind, and it's not something we've talked about yet. What changes or trends do you see with college relationships versus 5 to 10 years ago? That's a good question, since you worked here for 10 years and you're still working with the college community.
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing that I'm seeing 5 years, that's kind of a little bit difficult because it's still within this kind of very short time frame. Honestly, some people 5 years ago are still in college. So let's talk about that, right?
Yeah,
so
that's a whole nother session.
That's a whole other session too. But I think the big thing is developmentally where things are, right? So what you want and what you need right now as a freshman, sophomore, junior in college is going to look different when you're, after your graduate degree. Once you're in your career, your needs are going to change and you're going to look different. But as far as the trends that I'm seeing that's different, social media plays a big role in how we navigate relationships. It also plays a big role sometimes in being in a relationship or not being in a relationship.
And literally stating that.
Somewhere. It's like some people recognize that they're no longer in a relationship because their partner changed something that says that they're now single.
Their status, yes.
They're changing their status to single, which in the past, that was so uncommon for someone to find that out while everyone else finds that out as well. But I'm trying to I can't pinpoint just like a specific trend.
I'll tell you something that, and I've been at the counseling center. I was there longer than you. I've been here longer than you. When I first started working here, which was like 16, 17 years ago, it shocked me because students would go on group dates. They wouldn't go on couples dating.
Yeah.
And that just took me back. I was like, oh, how are you ever going to get to really know somebody,
Mm-hmm.
But it had a lot to do with social anxiety and not wanting to be alone with somebody because they didn't know how to talk to them. Right. And now I feel like that the trend of couples dating is coming back, and it has been. So, because my husband and I will see students out at restaurants, and my husband will say, "Look, there's a couple." It's like an anomaly, and it's kind of nice to see that back again because I feel like that's healthy to be able to learn to talk and relate and communicate.
Absolutely. And I think that is important to make sure that you are getting to know your partner on a more intimate level, not just sexually intimate, but just intimate, right?
Right.
And you really can't do that when you're traveling in groups. Also, you really can't do that when you're on your phone, and on social media and all those things. So there's some that piece is an important part.
Do you remember our former director talking about seeing a couple or one of the couple, and that person said that they were literally at the restaurant and they were texting each other at the table? Do you remember that?
I do. But it's not uncommon to just walk into a restaurant and see groups of people sitting there who's supposed to be talking to each other, but they're all on their phones. They're missing the opportunity to connect.
Missing the practice time too.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's take another quick break, and when we come back, I've got a couple of more email questions. They're more geared toward platonic relationships, such as friendships or roommates. So, are you willing to answer those too?
Absolutely.
Okay, because the title of the show is Navigating Relationships. I guess if I wanted it to be just specifically romantic, I should have said that right in the title. So, hang on. We'll be back in just a minute. You're listening to Brain Matters on 90.7 The Capstone.
WVUA-FM, Tuscaloosa.
This show is not a substitute for professional counseling, and no relationship is created between the show host or guests and any listener. If you feel you are in need of professional mental health and are a UA student, we encourage you to contact the UA Counseling Center at 348-3863. If you are not a UA student, please contact your respective county's crisis service hotline or their local mental health agency or insurance company. If it is an emergency situation, please call 911 or go to your nearest emergency room.
Hey, you're back listening to Brain Matters on 90.7 The Capstone. I'm BJ Guenther. We're talking tonight about navigating relationships in college, and I'm going to state right here, not just romantic relationships. It can also be other relationships in your family, in your social network. It could be, friends, roommates. And my guest tonight is Dr. Kimberly Jenkins-Richardson. I call her Kim because Kim used to work here at the counseling center, and she's now in private practice here in Tuscaloosa. She's also a licensed professional counselor and a supervisor. And we were just talking about, really, we've been focusing more on romantic relationships. But Kim, I've got a question here, an email question that is more about a platonic relationship or a friend group situation. And we get a lot, I get a lot of issues with friend groups, especially if somebody is dating somebody else and that's their friend group. They have that in common. It really messes everything up because when they break up, they feel like they can't be friends with that friend group anymore. But let me ask you this question that this person poses. What are some ways for students to increase their friend group if they are having a hard time making friends?
So increase the friend group as in be able to expand, like have more friends?
Yeah, I guess so. If they have a hard time making friends, it kind of sounds like, where do you meet people to make more friends,
Right. So, I am always a proponent of meeting people in places and spaces that you enjoy and in places where you may have things in common.
Yes,
right?
Definitely.
So, there are tons of groups that are on campus, and we've talked for a split second about social media. Social media is also a really good, cool place to kind of meet people who are like-minded.
That's right.
So, I always encourage, especially those students who are transitioning into college, whether they're freshman or sophomore and trying to find their place on campus, to look out for those groups of common like-minded folks. So if you are really interested in music, where do you go to find students who are really into music as well? It may be at the music department or in band, but it also may be folks who are out listening to concerts or, jazz groups on Fridays or whatever, trying to find your niche. But the one thing that we do know is that you're not going to find it in your dorm or in your apartment by yourself. That's one thing we know, right?
And there is an office here on campus that is all they do. It's the Office of Student Engagement. If you're listening and you don't know where to start, and also I think it's twice a year offer Get on Board Day. There's also volunteer opportunities, tons of volunteer opportunities for things that you have in common with other people. Like you may be interested in, working at the Community Soup Bowl. I just made that up. Or something like that. So there's really a lot of opportunities. It's just taking that first step, isn't it?
Absolutely. Taking the first step. And for some people, it could be a huge step for them, especially for folks who deal with like anxiety in social settings or just any form of anxiety that make you feel that maybe you aren't fitting in or that sometimes you may people may not like you, right? And we know that's our anxiety brain talking, that is not actually the case. And so taking the first step to getting connected with those groups, Get on Board Day is like you said, twice a year. It's a fantastic opportunity for you to get into groups and clubs that are maybe connected to things that you're passionate about, but also putting yourself out there as well. So if that looks like, going around the community, finding community-based projects and initiatives that maybe align with your passion, it doesn't necessarily have to be college students. There are tons of folks who have friends who are locals here in Tuscaloosa.
Well, and that's funny that you mentioned the social anxiety aspect, because the same person who emailed me about the hard time making friends mentioned that first, about, struggling with social anxiety and how to overcome that. I think you just answered that. Let's talk a minute about breakups, because I have seen students really be torn up, upset, considering some dangerous choices too. And, in the article I mentioned earlier, even though college students, sometimes they'll predict bad things to happen after a breakup, there's a lot of students, though, who can view a breakup as a positive experience. And the thing that always gets me a little bit with people who come in, let's say they are the ones who are, I call them the dumper, because they have broken up with somebody. They always seem to want to remain friends. And I always argue about that, because I'm like, you are getting the benefit. if the person that you have broken up with says, yes, I'll remain friends with you, then they are getting the benefit of not having to feel guilty or anything about that.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about students who have broken up and want to remain, I'm putting air quotes, in friends?
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I think the point that you just made is a really valid point, that the person who is the dumper, the person who is initiating this breakup, is getting the best of both worlds.
Yes.
Right? They're getting the opportunity to say no to this relationship, but want to continue to have that companionship piece without the strings attached.
That's right.
I think, honestly, the ball is actually in the court of the person who is being dumped in this situation.
Yep.
You have to make the decision about whether or not you are okay physically, mentally, and emotionally to continue this relationship in this manner with this person, and to kind of play that tape forward to figure out what that's going to look like for you. And if it's going to be too hard for you, it's okay. That's normal for it to be too hard for you to do that.
That's
and
right.
You may need to take a step back. You never know what the future may hold as far as friendships with this person, but you have to think about yourself right now and give yourself room to heal. And even if that unfortunately maybe rubs the dumper the wrong way, it's okay. It's
That's
okay.
right.
They'll live, right? They'll be okay.
Well, and I think some people are confused about, well, I'm supposed to, forgive this person, or I'm supposed to be friends with this person, and they don't have to be. I think some people don't realize they have a choice, like you said.
Mm-hmm. They absolutely have a choice. And I think once more people realize that they do have a choice in that lends to their voice and empowers them to make best decisions for themselves.
This may be a kind of an odd topic that I want to kind of touch on a little bit, because I find myself asking people this a lot. I find myself asking people if they recognize when someone is flirting with them. I know, because sometimes that is an issue, for people that is really kind of an obstacle for people starting to date, because they don't know. And sometimes they'll ask me point blank, I don't know if they like me or not, What do you think about that? Does that ever come up in any of your conversations?
It does.
For me to say?
It does. And it's a loaded question, because it is so perception based, right? Because someone who smiles and is very friendly with you may come across to someone as flirting, where the other person is just being like nice. Like it's one of those things. It's open to perception.
It's funny you say that, because in this same article, one of the things that they mention is, it says here, it's important to realize that men, and tell me if you agree with this or not, men tend to see interest where it may not exist. A woman's innocent hi may be interpreted as she wants to hook up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that I feel like that's pretty accurate, because sometimes it is just something that is very innocent that automatically just kind of piques an interest. It's like, she's kind of attractive there. She's cute. She has a lot going on for herself. Yes. And you're just for being friendly and just kind of saying hello. And now this person is on the pursuit, right? and you're not asking them to be on the pursuit in that moment.
No.
Yeah. And so
they take it the wrong way.
They do. They take it the wrong way. And then a lot of times with women, what I see is that it is kind of like an uncertainty situation. It's just like, maybe he's just really nice, or maybe he is just really friendly, or maybe he really wants to come over and change my tire because my tires are like all of these things. Wink, wink, right? Like you really don't, like you don't want to over expect like what's happening here. You don't want to assume that this is what it is. And sometimes it takes women a little bit longer to pick up those cues. Those cues. Yeah, those flirtatious cues.
Because if you're wrong, it's really embarrassing.
It is embarrassing. It really is embarrassing. But, one of the things that I often say is, okay, so do you want the person to be flirting with you? Are you interested in that person? And what's keeping you from talking about your interests?
Okay.
And so, and honestly, preparing yourself for, if the person is not interested, it's okay. We're still in a good place, but also you just really never know. And it's like a lot of assuming that's happening and you're uncertain, and it preoccupies so much time and energy in your mind. Like it's so much space.
It sure does. It's exhausting for some people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Let's touch on a little bit about bad relationships.
Mm-hmm.
How do you know when you're in a bad relationship? How do you recognize that?
Yeah, so that's a really good question.
That's a hard question.
It's a good question and a hard question. Absolutely.
I really do think there's a lot of students who are in bad relationships and they keep trying to make it work until they come to somebody like me or you or Catherine, and we're like, this doesn't sound healthy.
This doesn't sound healthy. Yeah. And so it is looking for those red flags. Being very clear about what your non-negotiables are. And what I mean by non-negotiables, things that you absolutely for sure don't want, don't need, and don't desire in a relationship.
Yes.
And being true to that, like don't waver on it. If non-negotiable is, I will not allow someone to mistreat me, I will not allow someone to cheat on me, stand on that, non-negotiable. Right. Stay with it, right? But also, and this is a little bit of a tricky point as well. When other people are questioning your relationship, maybe you should take a step back and look at it for yourself. Right. Sometimes our friends and family members, and these are people who are in your inner circle that are supportive. Not everyone. Let's be clear. It's not everyone, because everyone is not rooting for your relationship to work.
That's right. And people who know you the best.
People who know you the best. And we just have to be really aware of people. Like I said, everyone is not rooting for your relationship to work. Let's start there. No. But those people who are in your inner circle who know you the best, and if they are starting to question that something is amiss, you may need to take a step back and to kind of really do an evaluation of your relationship. Are you working harder to keep the relationship healthy than your partner is?
That's the truth.
If you are finding yourself working harder, now I'm not saying it's supposed to be 50-50 all the time. We all go through our things, and sometimes our partner has to kind of overcompensate for that. But if you're finding yourself overcompensating for all the things all the time, or the majority of the time, you are possibly in an unhealthy relationship.
And I think a lot of people stay in a relationship thinking the person's going to change.
But what is going to change? Well, what's going to change to make the person change? That's
right. And it goes back to what you said initially. You really need to think about like what your standards are. So, let's this is our last break. And when we come back for our last segment, I want to ask why people stay in bad relationships. Okay. So think about that, mull it over. We'll be right back. You're listening to Brain Matters on 90.7, The Capstone.
WVUA-FM, Tuscaloosa.
This show is not a substitute for professional counseling, and no relationship is created between the show host or guest and any listener. If you feel you are in need of professional mental health and are a UA student, we encourage you to contact the UA Counseling Center at 348-3863. If you are not a UA student, please contact your respective county's crisis service hotline or their local mental health agency or insurance company. If it is an emergency situation, please call 911 or go to your nearest emergency room.
You're back listening to Brain Matters on 90.7 The Capstone. I'm Dr. BJ Guenther. We're talking tonight about navigating relationships in college. My guest is Dr. Kim Jenkins-Richardson. She's a licensed professional counselor in private practice, and she also worked at the counseling center here with me for 10 years. And so she has extensive experience working with this age group. And we left off talking about bad relationships and how you recognize if you're in a bad relationship. But Kim, why do you think people stay in bad relationships?
Yeah, so I think it is a mix of a couple of things. I think there is a mix of being comfortable. And I think there is also a mix of maybe some uncertainty about what happens after this. Like, where do I go? Who am I with?
Yeah.
But also just this general idea that somehow something will change in the relationship and things will magically get better. And most of the time, that's not feasible or reasonable without something happening. So if that is going to counseling, sending your partner to counseling, because sometimes sometimes it's not a us issue, it's a you issue, right? Or a me issue.
That's right.
And you need to fix that before you try to fix
it's not
us.
me, it's you.
Yeah, right. And so, but also knowing that uncertainty, that fear of uncertainty about what happens if I were to end this relationship, know that this is not the only person in the world that potentially could be a partner for you, right? And so, and I just kind of feel like there's also like some concerns about this idea of failure. I don't want this to fail because what does this say about me?
That's right. Or wasting time too.
Or wasting,
for a couple of years.
Yeah. And I don't want to admit that this was a waste of time. But I'm also a proponent of just kind of thinking about relationships as learning experiences. These are teachable moments, right? So they either teach you a few things: what you want, what you don't want, who you want, and who you don't want. Yep. And also solidifies what those non-negotiables are for you. And you can take what you've learned from that relationship, this bad relationship, and make sure that this is not what your experience is going to be in the future. You are more likely to spot those red flags in future relationships now since you've had that experience.
That's true. I think sometimes your partner reinforces like your own self-view. If you have a negative view of yourself, sometimes you stay in that relationship because they reinforce that. I know that sounds counterproductive.
Yeah, but it does happen. But, that also kind of makes you feel like is this relationship bordering on some unhealthy patterns, right?
Yes.
Because if you are very self-conscious of your body and your partner is saying, I'm with you regardless of how you look at you, you've let yourself go, or who wants you because of this, and this, right?
Yes.
They are tapping into what we call your pain points. Points of pain for you that they know are sensitive spots, and they are tap dancing on it because they know that is going to affect your self-worth, your self-esteem, and it's keeping you there. Right?
That's right. I think some people also have low expectations. It's as simple as that, low expectations because of maybe their history, their relationship history, right?
Right. And also maybe even what the relationships that were modeled for them. We also know that sometimes the relationships that we have seen growing up, it can affect you and like show you what unhealthy relationships are and healthy, but it doesn't necessarily keep you from being a part of one of those relationships in the future, right? So, yeah.
Do you have, Kim, do you have any resources for listeners, like any books, any apps, any other podcast?
Yeah. So, there are a lot of resources that are out there. There is, oh my gosh, the name of this podcast is definitely escaping me, but there are lots of like websites. There are lots of, like I said, podcasts and other resources that are out there. Even on our Facebook page, you can follow us at Jenkins-Richardson Associates LLC, or on our Instagram page, JRA Counseling _consulting. We put up a lot of information about healthy relationships and also resources, right? There's some resources for a lot of different things. And I think that one of the biggest resources that you have even here on our campus is, of course, the Counseling Center, the Women and Gender Resource Center, and of course, great shows like Brain Matters that will have information about how to navigate certain things. Like I pause to say you should definitely listen to this podcast or read this book because it doesn't land well for everyone in every situation.
That's right.
So, There are tons of, great therapists that are out there who's doing great work, life coaches that are doing great work. But just make sure, and if all else fails, and if you feel like you are a person that's dealing with a bad relationship or unhealthy relationships or having issues with friendships or relationships, seek a counselor. Seek out counseling, right? To help you to identify what unhealthy relationship patterns you may be dealing with, or to identify unhealthy relationship patterns that may be happening in your relationship, and to help you figure out what's the best way to navigate this.
That's good advice. I think, I'm going to, in a minute, I'm going to give out our website and everything, but I think that's good advice. I wish over the years of doing this show, I always ask that question at the end of every show, give us some resources, whatever the topic is. I wish I had kept a list of all those and then put it together, on our counseling center website. I could probably go back because I keep all the show notes. I could probably go back. It probably would take me 10 years to go back and go through those notes. But I think we do have some resources on our counseling center website, but I think that would be kind of fun just because we've done some off the wall topics,
absolutely.
What is it? AMSR? Is it AMSR? Just some off the wall stuff too, not just the common things like relationships, depression, anxiety, or whatnot. So thank you so much again for being on the show. It really does go by fast. I say this every week.
It does.
But when you're interested in something like we are and counseling and helping students, it just goes by fast. The hour does. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I want to make a few announcements. Don't forget, our shows are recorded and podcasted to Apple Podcasts. Also, they're on audioboom.com and voices.ua.edu. You can just type in Brain Matters and you'll find some of our past shows. There's also a link to voices.ua.edu on the Counseling Center's website, and that website's counseling.ua.edu. You can also find the phone number if you want to call, if you're listening and you're a student, an enrolled student or graduate student, undergrad or graduate student. We also do couples counseling here at the Counseling Center. I don't think a lot of people realize that. So if you feel like you need to reach out to us, go to counseling.ua.edu and there's all that, our contact information there. I always like to thank a few people who've made the show possible. Dr. Greg Vanderwall, he's our executive director here at the Counseling Center. Terry Siggers from the Office of Student Media, and also my production assistant, Catherine Howell. She's also my colleague here. The other colleagues of mine at the Counseling Center who are so supportive, and the WVUA staff who help us, who actually edit our shows every week. And of course, my guest tonight, Dr. Kim Jenkins-Richardson. Join us again. Next week our show is going to be something that I do talk to students a lot about, assertiveness. So assertiveness and setting boundaries. So that's going to be the topic for next week's show. So come back, same time, same place here at 90.7 The Capstone. Thanks for being with us tonight. Good night.
This show is not intended as a substitute for professional counseling. Further, the views, opinions, and conclusions expressed by the show hosts or their guests are their own and not necessarily those of the University of Alabama, its officers, or trustees. Any views, opinions, or conclusions shared on the show do not create a relationship between the host or any guest and any listener, and such a relationship should never be inferred. If you feel you're in need of professional mental health and are a UA student, please contact the UA Counseling Center at 348-3863. If you are not a UA student, please contact your respective county's crisis service hotline or their local mental health agency or insurance company.